Well, hello, and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I was inspired to share snippets of inspirational conversations I've had with two truly amazing people. Now, one of the things I've been trying to do since the pandemic began is reconnect with old friends. Shelley Zalis certainly fits that description, but she's more than just a friend. She's actually a mentor. I worked for Shelley many years ago, and it was only briefly at that. She's probably one of the most optimistic people I've ever met in my life. My colleague David Brandt and I used to have a running joke after, either of us came back from a meeting with Shelley. We'd often ask each other, "How was the meeting?" And the other one would reply, "It was the most amazing meeting ever," usually in a tone of voice like that. Really, regardless of what happened in the meeting, Shelley would always find a way to frame it up as the most amazing meeting ever. So she and I caught up earlier this week, and we try and do that about once every year. And she now runs, she sold the business that I used to work for, and she runs an organization called the Female Quotient, which is also known as TFQ. And TFQ taps into the power of the collective to advance equality. And through their portfolio, TFQ brings visibility to the invisible, creates actions and accountability for change, and helps companies close the gaps across parity, pipeline, and policy. How's that for a plug? She didn't ask me to do that. I did that on my own. I felt it was important. Shelley does a lot of great work. Now, when I think of Shelley, though, I don't think of TFQ because that's not my frame of reference for her. I mean, it is now, but it wasn't back then. When I think of Shelley, the things I associate most with her are relationship building and, of course, closing deals.
A, B, C. A, always B, B, C, closing. Always be closing. Always be closing.
Now, truth be told, Shelley is much nicer than Alec Baldwin, or certainly Alec Baldwin's character in Glengarry Glen Ross. She once told me how she landed her first job and why she decided to work there. And note the way I said that. I didn't say why they decided to hire her, but rather why she decided to work there. Have a listen.
And then the boss comes out, and his name is Dave Vadera. He's this little Indian guy wearing brown corduroys and red socks and wallabies. And he says, "Shelley, please come in." And I meet with him, and he was just so cool, and he had this jar. I'll never forget my first moment of really not only how he looked. I didn't even think he was successful because he didn't operate that. He had this jar on his desk called Brilliant Ideas. And I said to him, before he could even interview me, I started interviewing him. I said, "What is that? What's that jar for?" He says, "Oh, whenever someone in the office has an idea, they put it in this jar, and every week we pull them all out, we talk about them, and we make shit happen." I said, "Then I'm going to work here." He says, "I haven't even interviewed you yet." I said, "But this is where I belong. I'm going to work for you." And I did. And I worked for him for 7 years, I think.
Yeah. Now, I firmly believe, and I know Shelley does as well, that ideas have the ability to change the world, provided the person who has the idea has the ability to put thought into action. Now, I have a friend named Bruce Miller, who's one of my neighbors and an old friend of mine, coached my daughter Maggie in baseball. And he, along with his wife, started a line of better-for-you snack foods called Smart Alex. And over the years, he would ask me for my advice. For what reason, I don't know. But I'm self-deprecating if you didn't know. And sometimes when he was asking for my advice, he'd be venting. He'd be venting on how hard it was to build something from the ground up. And I tell him all the time that ideas are easy, but it's action that takes grit. Because if it were easy, just about everybody would do it. So I know I just played a clip of, how Shelley got her first job. But kind of later in her career, she had this idea. And the idea was that there was a better way for movie studios to do research for their movie trailers. And back in the day, so back in what feels like the Stone Ages, movie studios would actually use mall intercepts to research their trailers. Now, a mall intercept is exactly how it sounds. People are in malls, they're shopping, and somebody with a clipboard approaches them and asks them to participate in a research study. Then they watch the trailer or test the product, whatever the research is, and that's how the data is collected. Now, that takes a lot of time, and of course, you're only interviewing people in shopping malls. There's a lot of people who don't shop in shopping malls. Are they being represented? Who knows? But remember, this was the 1990s. Internet research was just becoming a thing for regular companies, but movie studios certainly weren't doing it. But Shelley had this idea. She had this idea that the internet would be a better data collection mechanism for this type of research. So without even having a product built, she approached Warner Brothers with an idea. Listen to this story.
You can always get a yes if you ask the right question. And I think it was the question of him hearing himself saying, well, of course I'm not fully satisfied. So there was room to play. And what Dan Rosen says today, and also Richard Del Belso, who was really the leader at the time, Richard Del Belso and Dan Rosen were the two in research, but Richard ran the department. What Dan said got him to say yes to me was when I said to him, well, if you're not perfectly satisfied, let's play together. But by the way, I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. He said that was when he looked at me and knew I'd be his partner in crime because I was authentic, which I was. I really didn't have it was an idea that I had. But an idea is only as good as you execute and only as good as you know. And so together, we really did pioneer online research in the movie industry.
Now, how inspiring is that? There's always a yes if you ask the right questions. And also, if you present yourself in an authentic way. Now, one of the things you will hear when you work in sales is the word no. You hear it a lot. And most of us actually hear it more often than we care to admit. And some of us, when we're being trained, are being told to expect to hear it a lot. And therefore, it somehow becomes okay. And over time, you really learn that it's kind of disheartening to hear no a lot. But Shelley kind of challenges this notion a bit. And I'm really inspired by what she has to say here.
So then I decided, if it took me this long to get the name to get in this door, there is no fucking way I'm leaving without a deal. And I would define what a deal was. A deal was either the next date on the calendar that I would get the meeting set up, it's going to be closing on whatever, because it's always a yes, or it was always going to be something that was a yes.
Now, look, I know that hearing the F word can be jarring. And believe me, Shelley knows that too. She drops it strategically to get people's attention. It's just another example of how she breaks the rules. Now, incidentally, the day I met Shelley, and this was a long time ago, she broke two cardinal rules that I've heard. Number one, she told me her age, which started with a 4 at the time. And she also quoted Yoda. She said, "Do or do not, there is no try." I don't know many women, let alone women with Shelley's success, that go around quoting a Jedi master. But I have to say this, it totally works for her. Now, one thing I really wanted to dig into with Shelley was where her drive came from. Because, she came from a very well-to-do background, and she wouldn't deny that. And she'll also tell you that she wasn't a great student, and she liked to have fun when she was in college. And furthermore, she actually told me in our chat that she had dreams of getting married and raising a family. And it was her husband, actually, that called her on that. So I really wanted to dig into, why she would push so hard when her life could be easy. And here's what she had to say.
I also have taught myself that no one can make your bed for you, or no one can tell you to be great at what you do. It has to come from within. You have to love what you do. You have to want to do it. You have to find ways to make it fun.
So yeah, it comes from within. You've got to get up every morning. You've got to just do it. And importantly, though, she does reflect on how important it is to reward yourself, but never get complacent. It's almost like complacency is her kryptonite. And if you don't believe me, listen to her talk about that.
And I think it's really important to reward yourself because you can't wait for someone else to do it. If you think you're doing a good job, you probably are. But also the opposite. Don't ever not ask yourself the hard questions. Are you doing as much as you can be doing? Are you delivering your potential? Are you just being lazy because you're getting away with it? You might get away with it, but it doesn't matter what others think. It's what you think for yourself. Are you proud of yourself? Are you pushing yourself? And if you really are pushing yourself and you're proud of yourself, you'll be able to do whatever you want. The sky's the limit because you're creating it.
I hope you agree with me by now that Shelley's an amazing person. She's got a drive unlike anybody I've ever met, and she inspires me to be better at what I do. Importantly, though, she recognizes that she didn't get there on her own. She reflected on the importance of thanking your mentors. And if you hear a pause during this, just know that she's actually getting choked up when she says these words.
When I learned how to be in business development from another mentor of mine, Jackie Pinkowitz at ASI, she taught me business development. She taught me how to really create relationships with people that I never knew. And she doesn't realize how much she taught me. One day I would love to tell each of these mentors of mine what they taught me.
So maybe this is my way of saying thank you to Shelley. She shared a lot of wisdom with me over the years, and she always agrees to listen to me whenever I need to talk. So, Shelley, thank you very much. Now, I once heard someone say that a pearl of great price isn't obtained for by the asking, and the translation of that is, just because you want something doesn't mean you're going to get it. You have to work for it. Now, for example, I wanted to start my own business, but I had a lot of fear around doing that. While the lessons Shelley taught me, were important in helping me sell to clients, I needed to get over a self-confidence hump before I could actually take the leap into self-employment. Dr. Colleen published a book entitled RESCRIPT the Story You're Telling Yourself, the 8 Practices to Quiet Your Inner Antagonist, Amplify Your Inner Advocate, and author of Limitless Life. She is a positive psychology coach, TEDx speaker, professor, and award-winning author and lecturer in counseling and women's leadership at Rutgers University. I spoke with her about her book and was interested to hear that the book was inspired by her own struggles with confidence, self-esteem, and anxiety. Listen to her tell it.
It's all about self-talk. That's the simplest, synopsis of it. And, for me, it was a really long time in the making, but it originated from my own issues with confidence and self-esteem and anxiety and panic attacks, and how the voice in my head was really the biggest problem for me in all of those areas, and the reason that I was struggling so much. And of course, you don't really know that at the time. And so it blossomed from there. I think I became really just fascinated with the idea of how much control we have over how we feel and how we behave, and how much we, by changing the conversation we have with ourselves and the story we tell ourselves, can completely change the story that we live.
So did you catch the nod to Mad Men there? One of Don Draper's most memorable lines, to me anyway, was, "If you don't like what's being said, change the conversation." Now, he's talking about it in some kind of, advertising or public opinion sense, but what Dr. Colleen is referencing is the story you're telling yourself, what she refers to as self-talk. And she underscores this by stating that it's not our ability that keeps us down, but what we tell ourselves.
But a lot of it is so much of this running of I can't handle it. I can't handle this test. I got so much going on, and why I can't do it, and why I'm not smart enough, and why I don't belong here, and why, I'm never going to be able to do whatever. And how much that is often the biggest problem. It's not usually ability. It's not, usually that you can't find the time, or that you can't reorganize your life, or that you can't modify your behaviors. It's that because this keeps saying the same thing and it's not a good thing, we then feel a certain way and hence behave a certain way.
Now, when we concluded our talk, I'll admit, we did have a little fanboy, fangirl discussion of 80s glam bands, but Dr. Colleen also divulged the advice she would give her younger self. Have a listen to that.
That's the biggest thing. I would tell myself, speak, write. Don't be so afraid of what you have to say and what you feel, and sharing it with the people in your life, with what you pursue. Don't feel so scared to be vulnerable, to make mistakes, to be a flawed human being. Be authentic, be who you are, be proud of the mess and the good stuff. Because that was such a difficult thing for me. I think I was, again, extremely self-critical, really beat up on myself over anything and everything. And I didn't speak. There's so many things I went through in my life that were such really about the fact that I did not use my voice and I did not speak up for myself. And I was always very concerned about what people would think about me.
Now, maybe you caught that, but Dr. Colleen referenced something there that Shelley referenced, which was the importance of being authentic. Now, I want to end this by saying and admitting that, this was a tough year for me business-wise. A lot of my clients put spending on hold because of uncertainties around the coronavirus, and that wasn't easy for me financially, but it also wasn't easy for me mentally either. In the past few years, I haven't had to stress all that much about cash flow, but I can't say that about this year. And in an uncharacteristic display of vulnerability, I was telling this to my wife, who could sense that I was off. And importantly, she pleaded with me that I not beat myself up too much about it because so much of it was outside of my control. And she's right. She's totally right about that. So 3 key lessons that I and perhaps you can take away from this entire reflection. Number 1, the deals and yeses are out there, whatever they are for you. They're out there. I personally have to define what they are a little bit differently. And of course, I've got to work a lot harder to get them. And Shelley gave me, and hopefully you, some good words of advice around that. Now, the second thing is that, even though business is off this year, I can't let that be the headline swimming in my head. As Dr. Colleen would say, I have to re-script the story I'm telling myself. So thank you, Colleen, for instilling that bit of wisdom on me. And number 3, and this comes from Shelley, thank the people who helped make you who you are. And while that includes, bosses and mentors, don't forget to thank your parents and your teachers as well. It's the holidays. Pick up the phone and thank someone for all they did for you. So in closing, I want to say thank you for listening to another episode of Uncorking a Story. And I also want to remind you that it's the holiday season and books make great gifts.